Hello, everybody. It's Scott Bunce, and today I'm here with Ken Clark. Ken Clark is doing a lot of work as a Vistage speaker. He runs a company as a CEO. Gosh, he's doing a lot of things. Ken, can you take a second, maybe give us a recap of what all you're doing?
Sure. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist now. I've had some other careers along the way, but started a behavioral health practice in Arkansas that is now about 275 employees. We are a 5-time Inc. 5000 company. And along the way, in part thanks to my experience in things like Vistage, my company has become more and more self-sufficient and able to run itself, and that's freed up some time to give back. I always have benefited a lot from subject matter experts and speakers, and so I've gotten some opportunities to go on the road and share as a speaker about conflict resolution and some different ways to do that. So yeah, I kind of wear a lot of hats, but it's fun. It keeps me out of trouble.
So, when I think of conflict resolution, first thing that comes to mind is people coming out of COVID. Man, they are wound up tight. And
Yeah.
I see it. I mean, I run a business. I see it in the business. I see people on the home front that are wound tight, and it just seems like this is so timely. So tell us a little bit more about what it is and how you work through conflict resolution.
Yeah, I think of the old quote that familiarity breeds contempt, right? And COVID was a pressure cooker. It put a lot of us in a tight space for a long period of time, and it was also scary, and there's a lot of emotions. So, the normal space that allows us to kind of decompress from one another, we just really got overexposed to our own human relationships. For some of us, it was fun at times, but it brought out a lot of struggles as well. So even coming out of COVID, as we've gone back into the workplace, it's still it's not business as normal. It's a different environment. Most of us are anxious about a lot of things. Running a business is never been as hard as it is right now, I think. So that pressure continues to be applied, even though we're not locked up in our houses. And within that, within an environment where we need certain outcomes and we're passionate about getting them, we're going to get people who have very different, strong ideas about the paths forward. And so we're seeing that. It's from a business point of view, it's a great time to be a therapist. It's a great time to be a consultant that works with companies on conflict resolution. So, and I don't think we'll see it slow down. I think the kind of the genie's out of the bottle, and this has surfaced a lot of issues in a lot of settings.
Yeah, and not, put aside the fact that we've come out of COVID and people are wound up from that, we're looking at a recession. And I can just imagine with the business leaders in my group, they have to think maybe it's time to contract, and that's going to upset a lot of people. And we've always done it this way. But as a good leader, you're trying to think 2 steps ahead. And how do I change my business to be success? Again, relating to more conflicts that could come along.
Yeah, I think knowing that it's going to be a environment where emotions run high and there's a lot of anxiety and things like that, it behooves us to talk about what our structure is for working through things. To have a defined break glass in case of emergency kind of approach to how do we break log jams and ties, and how do we get unstuck. In the moment when it's actually happening is probably the wrong time to be figuring it out. So I think the forward-thinking leaders aren't just thinking about the bottom line and how to put cash in the bank and leave some margin of error, but they're thinking about that culturally as well. How do I strengthen the skills for when we're going to need them? How do I add some pad back to the brakes so that our culture has some stopping power and some pivot power instead of people just throwing up their hands and being done?
Exactly. Well, let's roll up our sleeves, Ken. Can you give us some strategies to deal with conflict resolution?
Yeah, I think the core strategy starts with the idea that conflict resolution is driven by a part of the brain that doesn't give us a lot of choice if we don't actively decide to do something different. Up until the Industrial Revolution, we were highly dependent on one another to survive. And the further back you go in the human experience, the more that we existed in small bands of people who their job was to protect one another and to share resources and all that kind of stuff. And so there's an autonomic part of the brain, an automatic part of the brain that is wired to monitor for and manage social rejection. The worst thing that could happen to you besides getting eaten by the saber-toothed tiger is getting voted out of the tribe that's supposed to protect you from the saber-toothed tiger. So there's a huge part of us that pushes back and gets really defensive over font size and how my plan sounds versus somebody else's plan, not because we're petty, not because we're defensive, but there is a hardwired part of us that says, don't let other people be right about you being wrong. And so the first step is really to recognize that, and that one of our highest duties is to create a sense of safety, of non-rejection in our listeners, in the people that we are doing conflict with. How do we reassure them mid-conflict that we still want a relationship with them after conflict? The more that we can do that, the more deliberate we can be in reassuring people of their worth while we disagree, the better those conflicts go. So all of the techniques that I really employ are about strengthening the relationship itself, not just communication and things like that.
And so if you're in the heat of the battle, how do you get somebody to realize that, hey, when it's over, it's over. Everybody has expressed their feelings and they still respect each other? What would be a set of tools that one would use so you can have a healthy rub as opposed to an unhealthy rub?
So one of my favorite is a thing we call an off-ramp, right? Which is just a fancy way of saying this discussion has an exit. And it's telling them in the middle of the discussion that my intention is to go back to normal. My intention is not to reject you, to fire you, to leave you, whatever, So we might say something like, this is what an off-ramp sounds like. Hey, Tom, I need to have a tough discussion, but it's going to be over and we're going to go back to normal as soon as I'm able to see X, Y, or Z type behavior change. We try and stay away from the details of that change as long as possible. Maybe even give them a minute to buy in. Tom, are you ready to hear what it is I need? And that allows their nervous system to de-escalate and regulate a little bit before we actually get there. But we're advertising in advance. We're going to go back to normal. The other way would be mid-conversation, would be to make declaratory statements about their worth. So anybody in the middle of a conversation could say, hey, let's stop for a second, Tom. By the way, I know this is hard. I know we're getting heated. I just want you to know I really value even having this conversation with me, and I look forward to us going back to normal. So you can even stop mid-conversation and just remind one another of your inherent value to the equation. So those kind of off ramps and things like that are really probably one of the most proactive, simple ways to do that.
Yeah, and then you're reinforcing their value. I value your opinion. I value this business relationship. I value this personal relationship. But let's get to what we have to get to advance the ball.
And valuing is a word that comes up a lot when I teach this in corporate settings. We like to say that we want our emotions validated. I want my feelings validated. The problem for a lot of us as very cerebral thinkers is how do I validate a set of facts that aren't valid, right? Like, in other words, you want me to validate your feelings around something that's incorrect. And so valuing is the philosophical pivot we make there, which is, I don't know if this is right or wrong. I don't know what we're going to do about it yet. I don't know if there is a solution, but Tom, I do know that you matter to me. So this matters to me. You're on my radar, so this is on my radar. And that's a valuing statement that allows us to pull somebody close in conflict without having to agree on their set of facts. And by the way, the irony, Tom, is a lot of conflict is just confusion about whether or not I'm important to you or to this company or whatever. So sometimes when we just say, you're valuable, I don't know what we're going to do about this, but you're valuable, that is the solution that was needed. The facts were just lightning rods. They were proxies for a deeper fear about not being important.
Right. So I'm sure you've been doing seminars and speeches for years now, but what is maybe the most common conflicts that arise, maybe both from a personal perspective and from business?
So when I teach this, I actually tell people that all complaints, no matter what words people use, boil down to one of three categories. And if you can learn to see complaints in terms of these categories, it becomes a lot easier to care for people. The three primary colors of all complaints are hurt, which is past tense, fear, which is future tense, and need, which is present tense. And whatever those things are, those are the themes. The details are just the most recent iteration of that. But all conflict comes down to one of those three things. Now, the problem is we have a broken notion that most conflict is about poor communication, and it's not. Right? It's oftentimes the communication is painfully clear, which is you think you're right, you think I'm wrong, you think you're smart, you think I'm dumb, and I'm the one that needs to change, not you. And that message is getting through loud and clear. That's not poor communication. That's an inability to reconcile on the details, which is a different animal. So hurt, fear, need, and that almost always comes down to, are you going to protect me? Are you going to value me? Are you going to look out for my interests, or do I have to do that? And I think in company and family cultures where we can highlight the importance of caring for hurt, fear, and need, conflict dissipates pretty rapidly.
So Ken, how do you teach that to a group of executives?
Yeah. Well, like all things, there's got to be an incentive. The biggest thing that I point out, there's a stat that came out of the company that does Myers-Briggs that roughly 2.8 hours per week per employee go into conflict resolution. So that's 7% of your payroll disappears into conflict management, writing the email, deleting it, rewriting it, deleting it, all that kinds of stuff. And attaching some bottom line to it greatly increases the incentive and the adoption rate. Once we have that incentive in place, then the core question always becomes, what are you trying to solve for? And again, I'm going to argue, this is really where I get executives to spend a lot of their time, is don't solve for the details, solve for the hurt, fear, and need. Whether it's a customer that's frustrated with you, or an employee, or a spouse, don't solve for the details, solve for the hurt, fear, need. Until you see the hurt, fear, and need, you are not ready to move to solution stage. Otherwise, you could miss the target, right? Even though you think you're spot on.
Sounds to me like empathy is a big part of conflict resolution.
Empathy makes the world go round. The world would be a better place if we all practiced empathy. A hard part with empathy is that requires us to match something I feel inside me with something you feel inside you. And I think for a lot of us executives, especially male executives, we haven't had a lot of practice labeling our emotions. So whether it's just getting a long list of emotions and doing an exercise, one a day, of, okay, what does that word mean to me? Let me go ask my spouse what that emotion means to them. We may have felt these things. Most humans do. We just haven't labeled them. But that's an important exercise, is learning to label these emotions in us so that we can identify them in other people. Side note, there's studies that in the year after therapy, for the first time, somebody's income rises. They become a better executive, a better salesperson, a better whatever, because that's part of the work you do. And when we're more empathetic and can process with less emotion, we sell better, we manage better, we lead better. So, part of this, I can put you in a classroom and teach you a bunch of stuff. You really got to get your hands dirty and do the work yourself.
Yeah, it's not a quick fix, huh?
No, it's a lifelong process.
Right. So, I look at your career. You've written multiple books on various topics, not just around. I guess we're calling this business psychology, not sure what we're calling this, but books outside of that. Tell me a little bit more about the big scheme of things for Ken and what he has been into and what he's all about.
Well, my former life, I was a financial planner, and I got lucky enough to get to write a bunch of those complete idiots guides books on personal finance. Got to weave a lot of psychology of finance, personal finance in there. But I don't really operate in that world anymore. I do a lot of coaching and speaking with executives and C-suite folks and teams. I love jumping on a plane and rolling up my sleeves and coming into the factory or the headquarters and doing that. Very involved in Vistage. You can find me there. But yeah, if it can ever be helpful, all you got to do is go find me on the internet or email me. The practice we run, the large practice in the Mid-South, is called Chenal Therapy, CHENAL therapy.com. Or you can email me, Ken at KEN at chenaltherapy.com. And if we can't help you, we'll point you in the right direction.
Well, I'm glad you gave us that contact information. I got one last question before I let you go.
Sure.
And I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you think of maybe the funniest conflict resolution you had to get in the middle and help somebody through?
There's all kinds of versions of this same conflict when you work with high net worth families, executives. I've sat through some arguments about how much is appropriate to spend on things where both numbers that the people are arguing about seem outside the realm of reality. Is $10,000 too much to spend on a set of sheets? No, you shouldn't spend more than $5,000 on a set of sheets. These problems are real for the people that are in front of you, but there's moments where you're like, this is pretty funny that we're arguing about this at $300 an hour, by the way. Why don't you skip therapy and go buy the sheets? But so.
Well, it's amazing. It's everybody's own perspective, right? And
Always.
And you've had a chance to see a lot of them. Ken, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Again, I would encourage anybody to reach out to Ken, and he's got a great message. He did a great speaking job at my group, and I know he's doing keynote speeches as well as you're obviously coming right to businesses and spending a few days at a time, I assume, in businesses.
Yeah, we show up and do a workshop, and then if they want individual coaching for executives or staff, anger management kind of stuff, all that, we can do it on site there.
Love it. All right. Well, thanks again, Ken, and appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.